Trying for Blake Carrington here, end up with Mills Watson here. Welcome to week 115 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
Back in 1986, it was last Friday, October 3rd, 1986, the season premiere of Falcon Crest. Now, this is actually a season that in 2024 we have just started watching, so I will try not to spoil the cliffhanger for the season finale too much. But the repercussions of the earthquake reveals a couple of deaths is the resolution, and that's all I'll give. So we know we'll have an earthquake to look forward to.
Now, we have to admit we don't actually watch Falcon Crest that carefully, so...
Well, we do have some cast members that we're hoping die every season, so maybe this time we'll get lucky.
Yeah.
A lot of extremely boring characters on that show. A lot. But back in the Santa Barbara world of Monday, October 6th, 1986, we watched episode 557. Cece finds Gina in his bathtub. As he ushers her out the door, barely giving her a towel to wrap around herself, she hands him a cassette tape and says she can clear Kelly of the murder charges. Sophia discusses this with Cece after they've gotten rid of Gina. She says, we should talk to Kelly, because she did mention Gina's name when she was all confused. And Cece says that he thinks it's a trick so that Gina can follow them to wherever they've hidden Kelly.
Now, Gina does score Sophia's bathrobe out of this little encounter. And right. We actually get a little bit of a callback to Gina being thrown out on an earlier season. Mm-hmm. Also without any clothes.
Mm-hmm. But this time she's grinning all the way. I think maybe that was her plan. A parallel. Lionel lets Jane down easy. There's a really great scene between Lionel and Jane here.
Yeah, very sensitively played.
It ends with, "You're a very attractive woman and I'm a very vulnerable man. If I respond to this temptation, it just wouldn't be right." Jane says, "I thought if you said no, it would be the worst thing to happen. But now I'm thinking it's an okay thing." Mm-hmm. Lionel says, "If I didn't have you to dig around in the mud with me, who else would there be?" And then Jane's mother calls. And we finally meet Carolyn Wilson after hearing about her for several months. She's coming to Santa Barbara. And it's actually interesting because Jane doesn't want to talk to her, so it's mostly Lionel talking to her. But Jane relates to Lionel exactly what she thinks is going on with her mother. And she relates to Lionel Caroline's usual method of operation. And we actually see it play out exactly as Jane says, as we keep jumping back and forth from L.A., where Carolyn is breaking up with her current beau. And Jane lays out the Caroline Wilson playbook, including the finale, which is getting a big check handed to her on the way out the door.
A little bit of a grift going on there. Caroline's also obviously from the South, and Jane's own accent slips a little bit into a Southern accent, I thought, at points during this. So that was kind of a nice touch.
Now, did the thought occur to you that perhaps when she gets to Santa Barbara, Caroline might be looking for the next wealthy gentleman to put her hooks into?
Well, I'm sure that she will be causing some trouble. I'm sure she will come to Santa Barbara. I'm sure she will be causing a bit of trouble when she gets here. Since we know that Jane has a bit of an interest in Lionel, and Lionel is basically available right now, I would put my money on Lionel being her Caroline's next mark.
This kind of actually not really is related, but it reminds me of the Knots Landing episodes we're currently watching, and it's just around the time where Anne moves in next door to the Fairgates. And there's all these great scenes between Anne and Paige. And they always have all these undercurrents of snarkiness on both sides. So I wonder if we'll see anything similar with Jane and Caroline when they're together.
Yeah, that would be quite meaty if we do.
Santana convinces Rosa. Oh, we haven't seen Rosa in so long.
So long.
To come to Cece and Sophia's wedding, pointing out that she had, in fact, already bought them a present. Rosa goes with Santana to ask Cece to return custody of Brandon to her. And Cece says, well, he did sign it away, but you can go visit him. So once again, Brandon is hauled out of bed for a visit.
Yep.
Cece asks Rosa to return to work. And without really saying yes, she agrees to go and talk to the caterers for him, who are setting up in the backyard, not quite to Cece's specifications. So I wonder if this will see Rosa returning to the Capwell house. I really don't remember. Mason stops Brick from strangling Lily and sends him home. So it's interesting he's the DA, but he's it's also his kind of, what is it, half brother? Semi-half brother? How does that work when you're both half brothers of 4 parents? We'll be seeing that again in a little while, too. Lionel warns Cece and Sophia that Brick has been drinking and was involved in some kind of trouble at Mason's place. Lionel and Sophia find Brick wandering around in the burnt-out remains of Buzz's. He actually doesn't shoo them away like he did the last couple times. He actually lets them talk to him and hug him. Brick, of course, reminisces about various moments with Amy, not ones that we saw, just ones that are being retconned in. And next thing you know, Brick shows up at Santana's place, saying Cece betrayed him. I don't know if that's... Santana's probably got her own place again. Maybe it's even the same one she had last time. She lets him sleep it off on the couch. So, wondering if they're angling at potentially a Brick-Santana pairing.
Yeah, this was a kind of an interesting combination. And, in a way, now that Brick is single, I think it's a little bit like with Nick. We can conjecture a lot of possible pairings and unpairings between the two. So this was kind of nice. I'd like to see where this goes.
Nick, may still have some interest in Santana, or he may be focused on Alice now, which is going to put him in a triangle with Paul, but he might just think of Alice as a colleague in the photography game. So... we'll see where Nick ends up in this swirl of single people.
It'll also be interesting to see when Kelly does come back, just how much Nick will figure in that storyline.
Once again, Kelly's still in the boathouse, and we still haven't seen her.
Yeah.
Sophia comes downstairs to bring up the champagne that she's been chilling and finds Mason is drinking it. Mason tells Sophia not to expect great joy from him tomorrow over her grand occasion. And then he toasts to my new stepmother, the second time around, assuming it comes to pass. Lily is traumatized by Brick's recent visit, but Mason asks her if it's real or just an act. In a huff, Lily packs her bags. As she heads for the door, she says, "You're not going to stop me, are you?" And Mason says, "And ruin your exit." Mason says she should focus her energies on Gina instead of Amy at this point. And he thanks her for helping him with Mary, to which Lily replies that he's still not over Mary, and then tells him she needs love and kisses him. So we'll see how Mason responds to that. So he's got both Gina and Lily throwing himself at them, this basically within 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Gina gets all dressed up in her little motel room, or motel-like apartment.
Wherever she's living right now. We haven't quite figured that out.
Because she's expecting Cece to visit her. And Cece decides to play that cassette tape, and it is an audio of the first part of the VHS with Dylan and Kelly yelling at each other. Mm-hmm. He immediately picks up the phone and Gina says, "Come on over. The VHS tape is right here." Cece comes over and Gina tries to get him to sit down and get comfortable and plays him the tape, and he is overjoyed. He is so happy. He almost hugs Gina. He thanks Gina profusely. "Where did you get this?" "Oh, I just came into possession of it." I mean, why would I hold on to something like this for a long time? Gets him to grab some champagne, I think, and then says, "Let's have a cigar to celebrate." So she lights his cigar, she lights her own cigar, and then she drops the match onto the VHS player, which she's clearly coated with a highly flammable substance, and the whole thing goes up, much to Cece's horror.
Now we have to assume Gina has copies of this.
Well, that must be the copy, the original, and Dylan's gun are probably still in that bus depot. I think that's the bus depot they always use for those things. So, Cece's horror will be short-lived. I mean, he must know that Gina wants something, and maybe he's brought his checkbook, but he will be a little surprised that Gina wants more than just a checkbook, no matter all the hints she's been dropping.
Yeah,
he still hasn't put it together that this is what she's going to ask for. So this will be an exciting opening scene, I think, because obviously if the real tape is somewhere else, he can't just strangle Gina right now. I think Gina's set this up really well. I like on Santa Barbara when they set up these little schemes and, planting like VHS tapes for people to watch and things. Once again, there was a little twist to it because we thought it was going to be Cece sitting down and watching the VHS tape. And then the whole thing kind of turned and became a cassette tape again, which we've seen multiple times with the little schemes. I don't know if that's just the writers realizing the logistics didn't quite make sense when they came to write the actual reveal episode, or a different writer decided to take it another way, wanted to move the action to, Gina's place for perhaps just logistical reasons for upcoming scripts. But it's always interesting that these things never entirely play out the way the rehearsal has gone or the way we've planned them in our head, even if they end up being successful. I mean, it makes sense if, quite often in soaps you'll see someone fantasizing about their wedding and then the actual wedding will go completely askew. That's actually always a tip-off when you see someone, when they film, what the wedding should be like and they show it to you. Yeah. That always means it will not go like that. But in this case, effectively it's the same as if Cece had watched a videotape in his bed, but they've just moved the action around a bit for whatever reason. So I'm excited to watch the next episode, which we probably will pretty soon. That's it for episode 557. We'll watch episode 558 and return. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
So, you're one sad broad, bitter, bored, boring.
Then why are you so determined to take me on as your partner? Have you noticed that I have a strong dislike for you? You might even say it's contempt. Get lost, Keith. I'm not going to be your partner, and I'm certainly not going to be your dartboard.
Well, suit yourself. You can fly solo, but I think you're going to find it harder as you go along. Statistics show that women of your age really have a hard time finding a partner of any kind.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 558 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, October 7th, 1986. Top movies of the week. Number 1, Crocodile Dundee. Number 6, Top Gun, still in the top 10. 7, Stand By Me. 11, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 12, Ruthless People, starring Supergirl. 13, The Fly, with Jeff Goldblum. 14, She's Gotta Have It, which Spike Lee remade as a series a couple of years ago that we watched. And number 26, Shanghai Surprise, starring Madonna and her husband, Robin Wright's future husband. Back to Santa Barbara, episode 558, 50th episode of season 3. Cece tries to put out the fire with his drink, but it's brandy. and the videotape that will exonerate Kelly is destroyed forever. But Gina reveals that the original is in a safe place. And Cece says, well, what do you want? And he laughs when she says she wants to marry him, but soon realizes that she's serious. And more than that, she claims that she will destroy the original tape if he does not marry her. Mason tells Lily that she can stay. So it was a couple of days of her moving out, and now she's back. So I don't know what the point of that was. Gina arrives and tells Mason about the tape and that she wants him to draw up the papers for the contract between her and Cece. Mason points out that Cece could just divorce her the next day. And so this is one of the reasons that she came to Mason, for this kind of insight. So she says the contract should be for 5 years at least. And he says, well, I think I can get you 6 months, and that'll be enough to get you a reasonable settlement in the divorce. Lily is annoyed that Mason is helping Gina, and Mason says that he's not helping Gina, he's helping Kelly. Next thing you know, we see Cece and Sophia and Mason sitting at that wicker table at the Capwell atrium, and Mason is scribbling away at a yellow notepad, and Gina's walking around with her cane still and her nice dress, dictating all of the terms for the turnover of the tape, and they're at number 32 at this point. But after Mason has finished, she says, I'll be right back, and heads out to the gazebo where she has Keith waiting. Now, Keith is kind of annoyed that she didn't get him to write up the agreement in the first place, but she says, Mason hates Cece way more than you. I need that hatred to fuel this contract. And, of course, Keith vets it. Notes that there's no mention of him being the chief counsel for the Capwells, but she says, oh, don't worry, this is just step one. And finds at least 5 clauses that need tightening up. So when she returns, while they're gone, Cece gets angry with Mason for helping Gina, but Mason once again says this is for Kelly and that he's put a few things in the contract that are in Cece's best interest, but thanks to Keith, Gina has all those items on a list when she returns, including some details about who keeps the tape during the 6-month wedding and some stuff about Brandon's custody. So, and then after, with some back and forth between Cece and Sophia and Gina threatens to ban Sophia from seeing Ted and Eden if she doesn't get full custody of Brandon, if and when there is a divorce. So this episode, we're seeing the whole plan of Gina's finally being laid out for Cece, and he sees his impending doom.
Now, I can't quite figure how she could ban Sophia from seeing Ted and Eden since they're adults.
Yeah.
So
she takes that as a opportunity to say, oh, you're down to 2 kids. Let's take a small detour to the Orient Express, where Keith asks Julia if she's considered his offer. Julia says, you'd be the last person on earth Cece would have working for him. And Keith says this is the day that Cece Capwell finds out that most of his future is not in his own hands. And Julia says, what kind of a hold do you have over Cece? And Keith says, all I can say is you'll be sorry for the rest of your life if you pass this up. Julia says, have you noticed that I have a strong dislike for you? You might even say it's contempt. Then Keith notices that Julia is actually celebrating her birthday alone and says, you can fly solo, but you're going to find it harder as you go along. Statistically, women of your age really find it hard to find a partner of any kind.
No, Keith seems so confident, and it seems like Gina's kind of left him to hang. I wonder if maybe he inserted something in there without her knowing, or I don't know. I just find it hard to believe he would just leave everything in Gina's hands.
It seems
I feel like he must have a plan B somehow.
Julia is visited by the elderly Mr. Hirsch, who delivers her the information about the eminent domain clause in the Capwell land purchase agreement. And Keith spots them and swings by with a little comment, wondering if this is Julia's hot date. Carolyn arrives in Santa Barbara and asks to see Jane and Alice. Jane says, "What do you care about Alice? She was just the maid's daughter." And Carolyn says, "It's called common courtesy." Caroline wonders how long Jane has been interested in paleontology. 15 years, says Jane. Carolyn wonders if Jane's seeing anyone. And Jane says, "Well, there was someone at the station, but I lost interest." Julia meets Carolyn and recalls having met her once in Washington. This is an interesting thing. I don't recall this, so we'll see where that goes. Julia tells Lionel that the state will invoke eminent domain on the Capel property to allow excavation. So Lionel and Julia pop over to the Capwells to give Cece the good news and estimates that the head of the sauropod should be just under the fountain there. Cece kicks them out.
Yeah, they timed this just for the most sort of stressful part of his negotiations with Gina. So really no one is happy to see Lionel burst in talking about his dinosaur at this point.
Alice and Nick are in the dark room developing the modeling photos. And Alice talks about having 3 boyfriends because that's the only number of nights she has free in the week. And she asks Nick if he's her boyfriend, but he says he's just a friend. Now, this discussion about having many boyfriends comes around because Nick has been telling Alice about Janice, who is a model and has a lot of boyfriends, and also mentions that she has done some nude modeling. When Janice arrives, Alice says she's glad she took the time to put on some clothes.
And it was really nice to see Janice again.
Yeah, it was
kind of a nice surprise.
Been quite a while.
And it's nice she was, I think when we last saw her, she was waitressing a little bit. So it's kind of nice that she's gotten back into her modeling career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was coming from a shoot at the time. So Janice says she'll give Alice's details to her agent. They talk a bit about Alice's look, etc. Now wondering if they're bringing her in as a love interest for Nick or someone who's not interested in one of the other single women in the show. So how many single men have we got? Brick? I mean, it's probably going to be a while for Brick. Nick, Pearl, and then we've got now Janice, Alice, Jane. Is that it? 3 and 3? I'm missing one. Courtney.
I mean, someone could fall into Keith's clutches as well.
That's true, since, his girlfriend will be married to Cece. Alice returns to the Lockridge house, and Carolyn says it's nice to see her again, and Alice asks a little bit about her mother. Jane has had enough of Carolyn and ushers her out the door, and we see a shot of Carolyn looking back through the window at her daughter with a look of anguish on her face. Lily has followed Gina to the gazebo, waits for her to leave, and then says to Keith, "I wonder what would happen if that tape disappeared." She tells Keith that Gina doesn't deserve his loyalty. And Keith says, "Do you know something I don't?" And Lily says, "That's right." So I don't know if this has something to do with Lily's secret.
Maybe this will give Keith a little bit of ammunition to keep Gina a little more honest.
That's a thought. We see Lily breaking into Gina's motel room. It's clearly mentioned as a motel room in this episode. So that is the motel that she's been in since she was basically broke. I guess she liked that place. But she has to hide when Cece's men arrive to tear the place apart. And so Cece's actually been stalling Gina at the house to give his men time to find the tape. Well, of course, they do not find it. Lily also watches to see that they did not find it. They report back to Cece, so Cece says, "Okay, I'll sign the contract." But Gina can't help herself and adds that she wants Cece to publicly renounce Sophia in the papers. And Cece starts to laugh and tears up the paper and says, "Our marriage is going to go on as scheduled."
Just a step too far.
Yep.
Just pushing her luck.
I know. She should be more focused on Brandon than Sophia, in my opinion. So that was a good Tuesday episode. A lot of stuff happening. Got some great forward motion on Caroline and Alice storylines and the big, confrontation. So, we will see now what Gina can do about if the marriage goes on tomorrow, I guess. Gina will be probably banned from the property too, so I don't know what her plan is. Maybe she'll send a Polaroid of her with the flamethrower and the tape or something to CC to see if he'll change his mind at the last minute.
I think Gina and Keith both need a plan B.
So we will see who's all invited to the wedding. We saw Alice has been invited, and maybe Carolyn. Oh, maybe Lionel will need a date, and Carolyn will volunteer. Much to Jane's chagrin, I suspect. So yes, we'll see what shakes out of that wedding, assuming that it is tomorrow in Soap Opera Days. And that is it for this Tuesday episode. We'll be back after we watch episode 559. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Where are those pictures that you took of her for that magazine? Can I see those?
No, that it wouldn't be the best example.
Why? Does she not look good? I don't care.
Well, she was in the All Together. The buff. No clothes.
Oh, well, how does her hair look?
Janice, this is Alice. Alice, this is Janice Harrison.
It's nice to meet you, Alice. Nick has told me a lot about you, including that you have a wonderful face, which you do.
Well, you have a wonderful everything. You look like you're in a magazine right now.
Well, thank you. I just came from a shoot, so.
Oh, I'm glad you had time to put on your clothes.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 559 of Santa Barbara. We watched McCloud on Sunday, as we do every Sunday. And A. Martinez was on McCloud, playing a character named Larry Moreno in an episode called Sharks. And playing Larry Moreno's mother was Carmen Zapata, who Santa Barbara fans know better as Carmen Castillo, Cruz's mother. And I recall in that Santa Barbara cruise in 2019, A. Martinez mentioned that she had played his mother, I think once or twice in other things. So this was one of them.
And this role he was playing in McCloud was actually very, very similar to an earlier role we'd seen him in, which I think was probably one of his first, which was in Adam 12 from the late 1960s, I guess. And in this one, he also played probably a migrant or a recent immigrant who had been wrongly accused of a crime.
I suspect he played a lot of wrongly accused people over his time in the late 60s, early 70s.
I think so, although we have seen him branch out into other kinds of roles. We did see him in a Barnaby Jones, I think it was, where he actually played the villain and was quite menacing. And we saw him in an old police story, probably also from the mid to late 1970s, where he was a very exasperated police officer who had been paired with this old racist white guy who was just about ready to retire from the force. So maybe that role was, and the kind of authority he carries himself with in that role, a little bit of a precursor to his role in Santa Barbara.
When I was looking up the McCloud episode title just now, I noticed he was in a Columbo too. So we've seen all of those, but I don't particularly remember the episode. So
we did catch him, and I think we mentioned it as well, probably a little later on. And was it an All in the Family or an Archie Bunker's Place?
Yeah, All in the Family, and it was the last one we saw, and it kind of looked like he might be a recurring character at Archie's bar. We haven't seen an episode since then, so we'll see if he's in any more. This was a weird season of All in the Family where they had a lot of two-parters.
And not much fun.
Yeah, a lot of downers. One downer after
That's why we haven't watched it again for a few months.
That's why we watch a mod right afterwards to perk us up. And then Lou Grant to bring us back down.
And to put us to sleep.
It's October 8th, 1986 in Santa Barbara. And guess whose wedding day it is?
We don't know. We think it's Cece and Sophia's, but who knows?
We are told that Kelly will be in the house somewhere, but not at the actual ceremony, but able to watch it from her location. So I was picturing some kind of closed-circuit television, perhaps, that they've set up for her. But I'll talk about it a bit again at the end. When we see what happens at the end, I have an alternate idea of where Kelly might be. But once again, we do not see Robin Wright or Kelly Capwell in this episode. Neither do we see Rosa, who was invited to the wedding. Cece gives Mason the task of seducing Gina to get the tape. Gina goes to Mason's apartment when he calls her, and we see a lot of voiceovers of what their thoughts are. And the whole time Gina knows that Mason is playing him for the tape. And Mason says, I hope I don't have to go so far as to sleep with her. And they're canoodling on the couch for much of this time. When Gina shows up, she wonders where Lily is, knowing Mason must have sent her away so that he could seduce her. She says, is she preparing herself for immersion? Gina plays along for a while, but then she gets worried she might succumb to Mason's advances. So she actually phones Lily so that Lily will come rushing over. And when Lily finds them on the couch kissing, she is pretty angry with Mason. So it's interesting because now Mason knows her secret, so maybe she's even angrier with him because of that. That is not Cece's only plan to get the tape. He had those two men that he hired last time to search Gina's motel room, and they are now scouring the city, which we only get one of the two men. The one that I labeled man number 2 last time. Turns out he was man number 1. So he calls Cece at one point and says, "Oh, we found something. We found a safety deposit box in the name of Laura DeMott." Mm. And so they think, "Oh yeah, that's the name Gina was going by." And then later he calls back and says, "We found a tape." And Cece, as the wedding approaches, Cece says, "Well, call me as soon as you ensure that the
5 minutes before the wedding is supposed to start."
So, and he kind of scowls at Mason when Mason shows up at the ceremony because Mason fails. Cruz tells Eden the whole story about the day Katie died. This is solely to get Eden to take off those damn earrings. We find out some more stuff in these flashbacks, and actually it's interesting because we see a lot of the scenes we've already seen, but at least double, I would say, extra footage of that night, of that day, of Cruz and Tori on the beach and with Katie.
And I have to say, I was really impressed, actually, with the conversation that Eden and Cruz had, and especially with Eden's position on it, because she actually walks Cruz through this whole dilemma in a very, very rational, kind of calm way. And I think maybe points out a few things to him that maybe he hadn't really thought of.
Mm-hmm. So let's go through the flashback part, and then we can discuss how Eden took that information. So the twist here, and now it kind of makes sense why they're kind of blaming themselves for what at first appeared fairly straightforward. We know when we see our exterior locations, it's that one beach somewhere in LA that everyone goes to film, and there's a rocky outcropping that Katie was swimming alongside. Well, it turns out that when Cruz and Victoria were on the beach and they had lost sight of Katie, Victoria said to Cruz, "I think she went around the bluff." Mm-hmm. And Cruz is like, "Are you sure?" And she says, "Pretty sure." And then, so Cruz, arm still in the sling, which they mentioned was an accident at work on his wrist, I think. He decides to run around to the other side of the bluff to make sure that Katie did come ashore there. We see that Victoria's somewhat uncertain about whether Katie actually did go around that bluff when she's on her own. And then another dune buggy shows up. So Cruz is in a red dune buggy, and Beach Patrol shows up in a yellow dune buggy. Or did I swap that around? And so this is that incident that Keith related where someone told someone about Katie. So the lifeguard runs up to Victoria and says, "We got a call there was a girl out there too far." And Victoria tells the lifeguard, "Oh, she's gone around the bluff. And I think the lifeguard even asked, "Are you sure?" And she says, "Yeah." So she sends the beach patrol away. Actually, I think she says the same thing about the bluff. So the beach patrol actually goes to do exactly what Cruz is already doing.
Yeah.
And when Cruz comes back, he said there was no sign of Katie. So I think Victoria is quite worried at this point. And at this point in the story, that we see Eden take off the earrings because she realizes how bad it could be for Cruz. But as you said, she's pretty clear about the fact that of the two people in the story, Victoria is the one to blame and the one that Keith could blame and that may be criminally liable for what happened. Cruz seems to think that he still could have some charges brought against him.
Yeah, but I think he's starting to see that really all of this concern Victoria's having is not so much for Cruz and Victoria, but for Victoria.
Mm-hmm. Now, Victoria has stood herself behind that little wall that kind of separates the maitre d' / bar area with the main restaurant area. So she's listening to the story and trying to gauge Eden's reaction, and is of course concerned as she expected to be when Eden starts to try to push the blame on her. And then later, when Eden's gone, talks to Cruz about it, and Cruz says, "Oh yeah, she took off the earrings." And then Victoria says, "Yeah, but not to destroy them. She could well put them back on later at the ceremony." So she is worried that Eden will decide maybe to force the issue by putting on the earrings. Keith is at the Orient Express bar where Gina finds him and is surprised to see that he's drinking milk. Keith and Gina argue a little bit about Mason handling that contract, and Gina does reiterate she thought Mason would have more of a hatred for Cece. Gina is wearing a gold and black dress and says, "Hey, you still have that invitation to the wedding. Why don't we go?" And he's like, "It's in like half an hour." She goes, "Let's go." So he had gotten that invitation. They actually talk about, why would you get an invitation?
Yeah.
They basically said that when he was still DA, Keith thinks that Cece invited him to sort of stay in his good graces because Kelly's, fugitive nature was foremost on Keith's mind at that time. So we have a reasonable explanation why Keith would be invited.
This was kind of a bit of a flashback to our wedding when there were suddenly all these people there that we hadn't invited. It's like, why were these people invited?
Yeah. At the gazebo, where the wedding is being held, we see Mason arrive and give that quick exchange of glances with Cece. Victoria arrives and Keith slinks in right beside her almost immediately. Gina is not with Keith. So at this point, Gina has already managed somehow to get in with Keith, maybe, even though the guards were supposed to keep her out, but maybe she's found an alternate method onto the grounds. Cruz and Eden arrive. Ted joins Haley in the audience after walking Sophia down the aisle. And then after the ceremony has just started, Cece's man calls Cece with the bad news. The tape only contains 15 seconds of Kelly letting Dylan into the presidential suite. Mm-hmm. And Cece realizes that perhaps this could be problematic if he proceeds with the wedding. And the next thing he sees is Gina perched like a little fairy on the windowsill of one of the Capwell bedrooms, waving the tape.
I kind of have in my mind pictured, a few weeks before this, Gina, at the public library or something, busy editing tape.
She probably went to the back of some VHS rental place and rented a couple of VCRs for an hour in the back. And she is, of course, grinning like a Cheshire cat.
Yeah.
Presumably, she's outside of Cece's window. So this is interesting. We've had a couple of occasions where people have seen people in the windows of the bedrooms from the Capwell grounds. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it necessarily was from the gazebo in its new location. And this is an interesting indication that the gazebo does have a line of sight with, let's presume it's Cece's bedroom, because we just saw Gina perched on that ledge a couple days ago, and why would they build a totally new set that was exactly like that? But that gives me my idea that perhaps Kelly was watching from one of the other bedrooms.
Yeah,
maybe
there's
Sophia's
a
room.
thought.
So that is the thing, because I'd totally forgotten about this Kelly at the wedding stuff over the years. And when it was mentioned at the start of the episode that Kelly was watching, I did suddenly get a reminder in my head that I had thought at the time that she was watching by closed circuit TV. That may be something that's mentioned in the next episode, or that may be something I just had guessed and all this time kind of had at the back of my head. So, yeah. So will Cece plow ahead with the wedding to Sophia, or will he pause it to confront Gina? Or will he invite Gina down to say her vows with him? No Rosa, no Kelly, no Courtney, no Alice, no Nick at the wedding that we've seen. But of course, sometimes when the day changes on a soap opera, suddenly we see people crawling out of the woodwork that were supposedly there in the previous episode, but the actors just hadn't been on set. And that's it for the Wednesday episode. Usually a dull episode in a soap opera, the Wednesday episode, but I think we're going to have a nice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday run with this. Tomorrow's Thursday, October 9th, and so we'll be back after we watch episode 560. See you then.
Bye-bye.
My, where's your roommate? Purifying herself by immersion off a short pier, I hope?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 560 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, October 9th, 1986. We now see Alice at the wedding, but not Nick. Cece and Sophia try to ignore Gina as they go on with the ceremony, but eventually Sophia decides she can't marry Cece. The guests are told the wedding has been postponed while everyone searches for Gina. The caterers report that they saw her leaving. Cece and Sophia refuse to explain what's happened to Ted and Eden, but they both suspect it involved Gina.
Now, I was wondering about that. I couldn't remember. Was that a condition of Gina's, or are they just not explaining it to them?
I think they're just not explaining it. I don't know if they don't want input from them on whether they should go ahead with the wedding or not. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Maybe just from a writing standpoint, they want, another shocking reveal scene, in another episode, so they're just holding off. Mason phones Gina to set up a meeting at 6 p.m. Cece and Mason drop a new agreement with plenty of loopholes, while Gina has Keith drop an equally big ironclad agreement. That night, Mason and Keith hammer out the details in Cece's study. Cece was particularly happy with the clause that delays the wedding to Gina. Gina was particularly pleased with the fidelity clause, requiring Cece to pay her $1 million each time he strays with Sophia. I think that Mason came up with this fidelity clause because Gina is also bound by it, and he's going to try to seduce her. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen with this clause. It's going to bite Gina in the butt.
Yeah, and if you're right, we've actually had a little bit of foreshadowing of that. We've had a few playful conversations between Mason and Gina where he's tried to hold her to a more celibate lifestyle. And we've certainly seen this sort of interplay between them lately as well.
The Gina tells Sophia, I want you packed and out of here tonight. I don't plan on running a retirement home for ex-actresses. This seems to be not unexpected by Cece and Sophia. They don't try to counter that. I don't think Sophia wants to be around either. Gina wants a quick wedding that will rival Lady Di's. But Mason points out it'll take a little time to put together, and Cece points out that if the press calls, it'll look a little less like blackmail if there's a respectable distance between the two weddings. So yeah, they're obviously going to try and drag it out as long as they can. But I don't know. I guess eventually Gina will just throw a wedding. Eden tells Victoria that she should take the blame with Keith over what happened to Katie. Victoria agrees, I guess. Eden hands over the earrings to Victoria. Eden later wonders to Cruz if Victoria will tell the whole truth, which angers Cruz. Victoria is at the beach throwing the earrings into the sea. So whether she even talks to Keith is questionable.
Yeah, I doubt very much if she will.
And the long earring saga is over or will continue to drag out because Keith still has his.
Yeah, definitely this is already sowing some discontent between Cruz and Eden, and I think we're starting to see kind of harsh words between them. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened just before they broke up last time, before the whole Kirk Cranston drama set in, when they were having that big fight over Cruz being promoted in the police department or something. So they're getting a little bit on edge with each other.
Jane tries to leave the Lockridge mansion before Carolyn arrives that night, but Carolyn arrives and asks if Alice is there. Lionel asks Carolyn where she's staying. They discuss Jane not being too happy to see Carolyn. And Alice arrives to tell everyone the wedding was cancelled, which surprises everyone. Carolyn tells Alice more about her mother and says that she has some photos that she can share. Her mother was Olivia, although she had a nickname that I can't quite remember, something like Ollie. And then we find out the story of how come Alice was left all alone in an institution, or at least half of it. It turns out that Alice's father is the one who had custody, I guess, and left town with her when she was very young. And Carolyn says, neither your mother nor I knew that you were in an institution until I read it in the paper a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, so that kind of explains that half of it. Where Alice's father is, no one knows at this point. And Carolyn talks about Alice's mother looking for her all these years. Alice relates all of the institutions she was in one by one, and then wonders when her friend Brian is going to find her. She goes, I guess that must be hard to find. Carolyn is excited to hear about Alice's modeling. Jane disapproves, and then Paul arrives to disapprove also, and take Alice to dinner. Lionel offers to show Carolyn the grounds, and Jane refuses to join them. So,
now, is this the first time that Lionel and Carolyn have met? Have we?
But they met at the end of the last episode, right?
They didn't know each other before.
No. At the Orient Express, Alice is excited to be allowed to order for herself this time. And when she gets ice cream on her lip, Paul kisses her. So that's moving forward. Jane and Lionel are labeling fossil samples, and Jane informs Lionel that he mislabeled the last one. So he's clearly been distracted by something, perhaps his walk in the garden with Jane's mother. Jane complains about Carolyn's mother act with Alice. Lionel says she's misreading Carolyn's motives. Lionel says Carolyn was proud of Jane when they talked about her. Jane says, I've seen that look in her eyes 100 times before, and every man from my father on down would regret looking back, and so will you. I think Carolyn and Lionel seems like a foregone conclusion at this point. Lionel's interested already. Carolyn knows he has money, I guess. Does he have money? He's got a house, but does he actually have money?
It's like, does Gina have money? She's still in a motel, and yet now she has all these luxurious dresses and that. So who can say, really, who has money and who doesn't?
I mean, presumably Gina will end up with a lot at the end of the 6 months, community property during the divorce. Although, I think Mason made a comment last time that Gina's only entitled to half of what Cece earns during the marriage. I think he's going to recommend to Cece to turn over all the assets to, Sophia or or some other executive in the company and some other family member for the family assets so that he doesn't generate any income during the 6 months. But then, he just needs to sleep with Sophia once and Gina will have $1 million, and that's $1985. That's actually quite a goodly amount of money. Mm-hmm. And didn't talk about it, but obviously Gina's excited about getting Brandon back. So. And Keith, I think, is a little worried that he's going to be left out of things. Plus, Gina's still kind of actively interested in Mason. So,
well, they did mention at one point, I think, during the negotiations, CC mentioned his annoyance at having Keith being named his new attorney. So it does sound like Keith managed to wiggle that in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. We'll keep Keith on our canvases because he's entertaining and can wreak all kinds of havoc from inside Capwell. Although, yeah, that might be interesting if Mason and Cece are trying to keep Cece from generating assets during the marriage, and Keith is the chief counsel at Capwell. He might block it or something somehow. And we'll see what kind of other shenanigans Keith can get into in that role. And that's it for the Thursday episode. So, Ted took Kelly to the airport, either in this or the last episode, I think. Yeah, this episode. So Kelly's gone. We haven't seen her this whole week or so that she's been here. Robin Wright is still shooting The Princess Bride. So we'll be back after we watch episode 561. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
As incredible as it seems, I'm beginning to think that the whole town may be powerless against Gina. She's like the beast who ate Santa Barbara.
That's ridiculous.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 561 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, October 10th, 1986. Still don't know what Ted's up to at school. This took the whole episode, but I managed to get it down into 2 sentences. Eden is upset that Cruz wants to go with Victoria to meet Keith. Keith agrees to meet at the Orient Express. And it basically ends with Keith at the Orient Express and Cruz and Victoria showing up. So the whole rest of it is just Eden arguing with Cruz. Mm-hmm. They really accelerated the argument. It's like we got to the point like, are they going to break up in this episode after just mildly being antagonistic in the last episode?
Well, I do have a feeling things are going to ramp up one way or another, because no one knows yet that Victoria has actually thrown away the earrings.
She said they're in a safe place.
Yes. And we haven't covered it yet, but Eden is given some encouragement by Sophia a little later in the episode to fight on, which we know will lead to a certain amount of intensity. Cruz tends to match her energy, so we'll see. We'll see where this goes.
Eden actually says to her mother, every time I think of the one thing that I shouldn't say, it's the first thing that comes out of my mouth.
Now, I can only imagine fans of this show watching this back in the 80s and being absolutely appalled by Victoria coming in and perhaps threatening the relationship between Cruz and Eden. But you would know more about that than me.
Well, didn't really care. I was wondering when Kelly was coming back and when Lakin was coming back. Brick wakes up on Santana's couch. And I said to Diane, well, this has got to be at least another day after he fell asleep on it because, of course, the wedding has happened in between. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it's the second day in a row. And Brick is somewhat surprised when Santana tells him that.
Yeah. I was thinking it was some weird timey-wimey stuff as well, but turns out our timing wasn't
well, I think
as
the
off
writers
as we
just
thought.
threw a twist in there. Santana visits Brandon and finds Gina giving orders at the Capwell mansion. She tells Brick that Gina must have something on Cece. So she's pretty insightful there. Mm-hmm. Interesting, the Brick-Santana relationship. I think they tested Santana and Nick a little bit. Now I guess maybe the writers are thinking Santana and Brick as a potential couple when things settle.
I actually quite liked their chemistry in this episode, so I wouldn't mind seeing where that might go.
I actually remember who Brick ends up with. So, but I don't know how long in the future that is. Cece tells Gina he's going to spend those next 4 weeks looking for the tape. That is how long Mason has managed to get the deferral of the wedding. And apparently none of the rest of the clauses kick in until after the wedding. So even though Gina is living in the house, a lot of the other stuff does not take effect yet. Gina plans a much bigger wedding than that little one in the gazebo. Gina offers to let Sophia sleep in the guest house. Sophia decides to get her old apartment back instead. I think Sophia had enough of Gina just in this one episode, watching her boss people around. And I think, Gina's probably hoping she can get a few million out of Sophia being so close to Cece. Gina decides to keep the wedding gifts and just change the labels.
Classy.
Mason tells Lily that she should tell Gina her secret because at the moment she's the most powerful person against Gina. And that will get her so befuddled that Mason can get her to reveal where the tape is. Lily is not really sure that's the best thing, but she gets angry when she overhears Gina tell Brandon what a great mother she is. Gina demands to know why Lily is angry with her, and Lily reveals that she is Gina's daughter.
Were we shocked?
I was not shocked,
No, I was not shocked
this time, and I don't remember if I was shocked last time, but probably I had the same guess I did this time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she talks about during the argument. She goes, "Don't pretend you didn't abandon me." And Gina literally doesn't seem to know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting when Gina actually finds out, because she's in the dark, and Lily is assuming that she knew from the moment she saw her that she was her daughter. So that's why she's been so angry with Gina. Mason witnesses this whole thing, though, so. Yeah, we'll see how that shakes out on Monday. Mm-hmm. So Gina's in several different storylines all at once.
She is.
She's also still a suspect in the poisoning of Santana, or the drugging of Santana, which, we'll see how far that can go. Santana still seems to want to pursue it, but I don't know if any new evidence can pop up now that Angel's sort of out of the picture. And that is it. A lot of these things that happened just got dragged out over the course of the whole episode. So very little actually happened. We had a cast credits. We now have a new cast member, Carolyn Wilson, played by Lenore Kasdorf. Sophia's credit is Sophia Capwell Armonti without a slash. Mm-hmm. And in the day player section, I guess, of the credits, Brandon Call, of course, was back as Brandon Capwell in this episode.
And I don't know if we did the research on it or not. A few days ago, we talked about all the various things we've seen A. Martinez in. And I think we said he had been in an Adam 12. And we're thinking now it was probably a Dragnet around the same era. So we'll have to do a little bit of research on that.
Right now, we are kind of getting ready for our trip to New York in about a month for the Another World 60th anniversary celebration. So if you were an Another World fan, I understand there are still tickets. Go on Facebook and search Another World 60th anniversary celebration, and you will find the person to contact about tickets if you could make it to Tarrytown, New York on May the 4th. And that is it for week 115 of Santa Barbara. Hopefully we'll see Minx again soon. Mm-hmm. And we'll see how this month before the wedding goes. Now, that's why I thought the wedding happened in November, because there is going to be a wedding in November.
And it sweeps.
Exactly. We'll be back after we watch episode 562 of Santa Barbara for week 116. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And by the way, I want you packed and out of here by tonight.
Don't you dare give her any orders.
I don't plan on running a retirement home for ex-actresses.